what you're explaining is that the trend is that it tends this variance has all gone in one direction for the vast majority out of the numbers. A number of exit polls, the trend all seems to point in one direction. So if it was a random occurrence between two candidates, as the number increases, we would expect there to be, closer and closer to 50%, maybe, with a variance here and there. However, in this case, you said 24 out of 26 of the contests, the discrepancies all go in one direction.
Right.
Uniformly almost. Now, varying in magnitude, of course, but what's happening is the trend is in one direction.
Yeah, it's called the law of large numbers.
Yes.
You're flipping a coin. The more flips, the closer the total is going to get to 50%. It's called the law of large numbers. You might get 7 out of 10 be heads, but then it's going to slowly, when you get to 40, 50 flips, it's going to be very close to 50% each, heads and tails. So it's a very simple, basic probability concept. The one with the margin of error, however, is more complicated, because there we're looking at the actual magnitude of the change, not just the change plus or minus. We're looking at the magnitude and the margin of error, as I said, which basically, when at the point at which you're at the margin of error, let's say the exit poll is exactly the margin of error away from the vote, there's a 97.5% probability that it's a valid election, or let's put it this way, it's a fair election, or a 2.5% probability that would occur, that you would be a margin of error above the recorded vote. Now, if you double the margin of error, then it gets down to 0. Okay, all this is in my blog, and people can see it. Now, I just want to mention one thing. As long as we're on this topic, this is very important for people to understand this. I have done an analysis of presidential elections from 1988 to 2008, where I looked at 274 state exit polls over the 6 elections. Almost half, 135, exceeded the margin of error. You would only expect 14 out of 274 to exceed the margin of error. But half of them did, 135. 131 moved in the direction of the Republican. The probability of that occurrence, in other words, in every election, the Democrat did better than his recorded vote indicated. In actuality, I'm going to throw out the numbers, very simple. Over the 6 elections, the Democrat president, on the exit poll basis, was leading 52 to 42%, 6% third party. On the recorded vote, the Democrat was leading by 48 to 46%. You have an 8% difference in margin. So that is, to me, proof beyond any doubt that the movement, the one-sided shift from the exit poll to the vote proves election fraud. So this is nothing new. I'm going back to 1988. Democrats, in my opinion, well, the numbers show that they definitely won 5 of the 6 elections, and I believe they also won the 6th in 1988. We have the same phenomenon with returning voters, more returning voters than were alive. Got to get put into the exit poll crosstab to match the recorded vote.
Let me step in here for a second, Richard. So what you're saying is, again, just like we've seen in this primary, that you went back and chronicled elections from 1988, like you just said, and you see that same trend occurring where it appears that Democrats do poorer in the recorded vote than their exit polling would have them, have them winning. So yes. and the trend is completely one-sided. You said how many out of how many? Did the trend go to Republican? 131 out of 135? That exceeded the margin of error?
Margin of error. 135 exceed the margin of error, which was a 0 probability and 131 of the 135 exceed the margin of the Republicans, which is another zero probability. You would only expect half would go either way. So, so the odds of this occurring are 1 in trillion. Okay?
Yeah, virtually impossible, more or less.
Totally impossible.
I want
like to use this. Let me use this analogy.
Go ahead.
You know the universe is finite. Most people think it's infinite. There are trillion stars in the universe, estimated. One that's a trillion times a trillion. The numbers that I'm using in probability calculation are a trillion times a trillion taken 8 or 9 times. So there are more, the probability is lower than if you were to pick out, if I asked you to pick out one star in the universe at random, or you pick out, and you can see if you get that star. The chances of you picking a star is greater than that the elections were clean. In other words, the probability of fraud is greater than the chance of you getting one of the stars in the universe. I just throw that out.
Okay.